The restaurant was buzzing that evening, gold chandeliers, white tablecloths, and the kind of laughter that only comes from people who've never worried about bills. At the far corner sat Mr. Dalton Reeves, a rich man known for two things, his money, and his arrogance. He waved his glass at a passing waitress. "You there, what's your name?" The young woman froze mid-step. Maya, sir." "Maya," Dalton repeated, eyeing her up and down. "You're the one they say used to play the piano here before you started serving tables, right?" She nodded carefully, clutching her tray. "Yes, sir. But that was a long time ago." Dalton leaned back in his chair, a sly smile forming. "Well, let's hear it then. Show us what a waitress can do." A few people chuckled under their breath. Maya's face tightened, but she said nothing. "Sir, I'm on duty." He interrupted sharply. "Oh come on, it's just for fun. I'll even tip you for the performance." Laughter rippled around the table. Maya glanced at her manager, who stood frozen at the counter, not daring to interfere. Finally, with quiet dignity, she placed her tray down and walked toward the grand piano in the corner. The room went silent as she sat down, her trembling hands hovering over the keys. Dalton whispered loudly enough for everyone to hear, "Don't break it, sweetheart." Then, she began to play. The first note was soft, trembling, like a whisper in the storm. But then, her hands moved faster. Music poured from her fingertips like liquid fire, deep, emotional, powerful. Conversations stopped. Glasses were lowered. Even the laughter died. Dalton's smirk slowly vanished. Every note seemed to tell a story, of pain, strength, and something raw that money could never buy. The crowd stared, mesmerized, as Maya played with her eyes closed, lost in the sound. When she finished, the silence was deafening. Then, out of nowhere, the entire restaurant stood and applauded. Tears shone in a few eyes. Dalton didn't move. His hand, still gripping his glass, trembled slightly. Where did you learn to play like that?" he finally asked. Maya turned to him, her expression calm but steady. "My father taught me," she said quietly. "He was your piano teacher, before you fired him for being black." Dalton's face drained of color. He opened his mouth to speak, but no sound came out. Maya stood up, bowed politely to the room, and walked away, leaving him sitting there, surrounded by applause that wasn't for him anymore. Dalton sat frozen as the applause faded, his glass untouched. His friends shifted uncomfortably, glancing between him and the piano. The laughter that had once filled the room now felt heavy, wrong. He muttered something about needing air and stumbled toward the exit. Outside, the night was cold. The sound of the piano still echoed in his mind, those notes that carried more truth than all his wealth could hide. He lit a cigarette with shaking hands, but it slipped from his fingers before he could take a drag. He couldn't shake the name. Maya. Later that night, long after the restaurant had closed, Dalton asked the manager for her file. He found it easily, Maya Jefferson. His eyes widened at the last name. Jefferson. The same as Robert Jefferson, the man he'd fired 10 years ago for making the guests uncomfortable. Robert had been the kindest man Dalton's family ever knew, patient, gifted, gentle. But Dalton had chosen arrogance over decency that day. And now his daughter stood in front of him, carrying that same fire in her fingers. He found her the next morning, outside the restaurant, still in her uniform, sipping coffee from a paper cup. "Maya," he said quietly. She looked up, wary. "Mr. Reeves." He hesitated. "Your father, he was Robert Jefferson, wasn't he?" She nodded slowly. "You remember him?" Dalton's throat tightened. "I do. He taught me everything I know about music. But I never thanked him. I treated him." He stopped himself. "I was wrong." Maya's gaze softened, but her tone stayed firm. "He forgave you, you know. Before he died, he said you were just lost in your own noise." Dalton blinked, taken aback. "He said that?" She nodded. "He told me to never stop playing. Because one day, someone who once silenced our music would finally hear it." Dalton's voice broke slightly. "I heard it last night." Maya smiled faintly, standing to leave. Then I guess his wish came true. He watched her walk away, the morning sun catching her hair, and for the first time in years, Dalton didn't feel rich. He just felt small, humbled, quiet, and strangely, free. A week passed, but for Dalton, it felt like years. The melody Maya played haunted every corner of his mind, the way her fingers moved with her father's grace, the way every note seemed to peel back layers of guilt he didn't know he still carried. He sat alone in his study one night, staring at a dusty framed photo on his wall, an old class picture from his youth. In the corner stood Robert Jefferson, smiling proudly with a young Dalton beside him, holding sheet music. The memory hit him hard. He remembered how patient Robert had been, how he believed every student could find the sound that lives in their heart. Dalton had mocked that once. Now, he finally understood it. The next morning, Dalton called his lawyer. "I want to start a music foundation," he said firmly. "For underprivileged kids, those who can't afford lessons, instruments, anything. I want it in Robert Jefferson's name." The lawyer blinked. "Sir, that's quite a..." "Just do it," Dalton interrupted. "No press, no publicity. Just make it happen." Days later, Maya received a letter at work. Inside was a simple note written in Dalton's hand. "Greater than, for your father, the man who taught me music has no color. The Jefferson Music Foundation opens next month. You will be its first director." Tears welled in her eyes as she read it again. She rushed to the address listed below, and when she arrived, she froze. It was the same old building her father once taught in, restored, polished, alive again. Children's laughter echoed inside as a few local teachers unpacked instruments. Dalton stood quietly near the doorway, not in a suit this time, just in a plain shirt. Maya walked up to him slowly. "You did this?" He smiled faintly. "No, we did. Your father planted the seed. You brought it back to life." For a moment, neither spoke. The music of a young girl's piano practice filled the air, a soft tune, imperfect but full of heart. Maya looked up. "He'd be proud, you know." Dalton nodded, eyes glistening. "He should be proud of you." And as the morning light flooded the hall, the two stood side by side, the man who once silenced a song, and the woman who made the whole world hear it again.